You're not fighting this? I'm gonna do something better than fight. I'm gonna disappear and let them think they've won. And then I'm gonna come back with something they can't account for. Which is? You said you'd cover it last week.
And I meant it. Give me until Friday.
Friday's what you said last Friday.
Then I guess I'm consistent. Same handwriting, same pattern. 10 years apart and he didn't even bother changing the forgery style. You're gonna do this again, aren't you? Right under everyone's nose. Marry a stranger to get inside Cassel events. That's a hostage situation with vows. He'll be at the counter. Just talk to him. And if he says no, ask. Gray jacket, ridiculous hair, counter by the window. Okay, fastest route to justice. Just words, just a signature. Marry me tonight, I'll pay you.
Yes?
I'm sorry?
You have no idea how useful a wife would be to me right now.
You're Dorian Cassel's brother.
Half-brother. And you're welcome, by the way. Most people would lead with thank you.
You let me think I let you finish your
You
sentence.
proposed, I said yes.
I need access to your brother. Events, records, the kind of places an accountant with a grudge can't go, but
A Cassel wife can. Then it seems we are exactly what the other one accidentally ordered.
You're not what the papers say.
Careful. That sounded almost like a compliment.
Don't let it go to your head. I still think you're insufferable.
I can live with insufferable. It's indifference that kills people. You've been photographing for 2 weeks. I noticed on day 3.
Iris went very still. I let it continue, he said, because whatever you're looking for, I think we're looking for the same man. I just needed to know if you'd tell me the truth before I told you mine. It was the first turning point. The moment the fake marriage stopped being 2 secrets running in parallel and became, however reluctantly, one shared war. Iris told him everything. Her father's ruined trading firm, the forged contracts that mirrored the ones now bleeding Dorian's company dry, the decade of grief dressed as guilt that had followed her family since his suicide note called himself a thief he never was. Dorian told her his own suspicion, one he hadn't dared say aloud even to Marcus, that Dorian hadn't improvised this fraud. He'd run it before, successfully, which meant somewhere in Cassel Shipyard's records was the ghost of Iris's father's company, buried and disguised, waiting to be found. If we find it, Iris said, it doesn't just clear my father. It proves a pattern. Juries don't convict on isolated coincidences. They convict on patterns. Then we stop hiding from each other, Dorian said, and start hiding together. For the first time since the wedding, the word together didn't feel like a strategy. The gala came faster than either of them wanted. Dorian's engagement announcement to Celine had been moved up, a power move meant to coincide with the unveiling of the very research vessel Dorian had spent his fortune building, as though Dorian intended to stand on his brother's ruin and call it a stage. Iris arrived on Dorian's arm in a navy gown, playing the devoted, quietly triumphant wife the tabloids expected, while beneath the surface both of them carried copies of records they'd spent weeks assembling. Transfer chains, shell subsidiaries with names too similar to be coincidence, a decade-old trading firm called Halden and Marsh appearing, disguised under 3 name changes, in Cassel's own ledgers. Dorian saw them across the ballroom and smiled the way predators smile at prey they believe is already dead. "Brother," he said, raising a glass. "And the mysterious Mrs. Cassel. I confess, I didn't think you had it in you to recover so quickly. Rebound marriages usually smell of desperation." "Careful, Dorian," Dorian said, smiling in a way that made Celine, standing beside him, visibly pale. "Desperation is a scent I know intimately. I learned to recognize it on you years ago. It should have ended there, a war of words, a party, a night to survive. Instead, it was Celine who broke first. Iris Halden," she said quietly, staring at Iris as though seeing a ghost. "I thought that name died with your father." The room seemed to tilt. "You knew my father," Iris said. "I audited his firm," Celine whispered, and for the first time, the polished mask slipped, revealing something that looked almost like fear. "Before I ever met Dorian, I found the fraud in his books. I thought it was his. I didn't know," she stopped herself, eyes flicking to Dorian with dawning horror. "I didn't know it was the same handwriting I later forged for you. It was the twist neither of them had allotted for. Celine hadn't simply been Dorian's willing accomplice. She had been, a decade earlier, an unwitting witness to the original crime. a promising young auditor who had unknowingly validated Elian's first fraud against Halden and Marsh, and who had spent 10 years being quietly blackmailed into helping him repeat it, terrified that exposing him would also expose her own career-ending mistake. "You've been protecting him," Dorian said slowly, "because you think you're guilty too." "I am guilty," Celine said, voice breaking. "I just didn't know how guilty until this moment." Elian's calm finally cracked. "This is a party trick," he said too loudly, drawing eyes from nearby guests. "My brother's little accountant wife has clearly manufactured a story to save her father's disgraced name." "I don't need to manufacture anything," Iris said, and for the first time since the wedding, her voice was not a bartender's or a spy's, but simply entirely her own. "I have 10 years of your handwriting, Elian. And now I have hers, too, a decade apart, matching the same forged signature style. That's not a coincidence, a jury dismisses. That's a pattern. What followed was not clean." Elian did not confess gracefully, nor did the board immediately believe 2 years of fabricated evidence over the family name they'd trusted for a decade. He fought, hiring lawyers, threatening countersuits, insisting Celine had acted alone out of guilt and obsession, insisting Iris had married Dorian purely to extort the family fortune, insisting Dorian himself had orchestrated a smear campaign out of bitterness. For 3 tense weeks, it looked as though the pattern Iris had built her case around might collapse under Elian's money and Elian's lawyers and Elian's decade of practiced charm. Then Celine did the one thing no one expected. She turned herself in. Not out of love for Dorian, not out of guilt alone, but because Iris had said one true thing to her privately, away from the cameras and the lawyers. "You spent 10 years thinking silence made you safe. It only made you smaller. You can stay small forever, or you can be the one person whose testimony can't be bought, because you're the only one in this with nothing left to protect." Celine's testimony, backed by the paper trail Iris and Dorian had built together, was enough. Dorian Cassel was removed from the board within the month, formally charged with fraud spanning both companies, and the case against Iris's late father was reopened and, 8 weeks later, formally cleared. Halden and Marsh was posthumously restored to solvency on paper, and more importantly, in reputation, the one thing Iris had actually been fighting for. Dorian reclaimed his seat, his shipyard, and his half-finished research vessel, which the board, eager to distance itself from Elian's scandal, now fully funded almost apologetically. There was, of course, the small matter of the marriage. "Rule 1, Iris said, standing on the deck of the newly finished vessel the night of its official launch, the harbor lit gold beneath them exactly as it had been the night Dorian lost everything. "This marriage ends the moment either of us gets what we came for." "I got what I came for." "You did," Dorian agreed. "So did you." "I did." He turned to face her fully, the coldness the tabloids loved to write about entirely absent from his face. "Which means, according to our contract, I have no further reason to keep you here." "None at all. Except," he said, "I find I've developed an inconvenient habit of wanting you here anyway." Which wasn't in the contract. I should have had Marcus draft a clause for it. Iris felt something in her chest loosen that had been clenched for 10 years. Since the night her father died believing he was a thief, since every night after that she'd spent convinced that trusting anyone completely was a luxury she couldn't afford. "You still owe me an apology," she said, "for letting me marry the wrong man on purpose." "I let you marry exactly the right man," Dorian said. "You were just aiming at the wrong target." "That's not better." "It's a little better." She laughed, the first unguarded laugh she'd allowed herself in longer than she could remember. And when he kissed her, it was not part of any performance for any gala, any board, any lie they'd once needed to survive. It was for the first time since the rain-soaked night that had started it all, entirely unremarkably real. 6 months later, the research vessel Halden's Promise, renamed at Dorian's quiet insistence, set out on its first survey of the Meridian Coral Shelf, Iris on the bridge beside her husband, no longer undercover, no longer disguised, no longer fighting a war that belonged to anyone but themselves. Somewhere behind them, in a courtroom across the city, Dorian Cassel was beginning a very long sentence for a crime he'd once believed too elegant to ever be traced. And somewhere in the harbor lights, blurring gold across the water exactly as they had the night 2 strangers said yes to the wrong question and got, against every possible odd, precisely the right answer. A marriage that had begun as a lie finally became, simply true. The end.